Ladies and gentlemen, referee Mark Honors called a stop to this contest at 2 minutes, 4 seconds of the very first round. UFC heavyweight undisputed champion of the world, Johnny
Jon Jones, there's no doubt that Jon Jones is special. He's the greatest of all time. He's undefeated. He's never lost a fight ever in the UFC. He's fought all the best competition out there.
Jon Jones might just be the single greatest fighter to ever lace up gloves and fight. A freak athlete with a level of fight IQ that was years ahead of his time. Even now, as the heavyweight champion of the world, we're still waiting on someone to rise up and truly get the better of this dominant figure. Here are some of the greatest finishes in the career of Jon Bones Jones. As always, if you guys enjoy the video, please be sure to let us know by giving it a like and hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss any future uploads. Without further ado, let's get into it. Vladimir Matyuchenko. And what better way to kick things off than with a masterful display of an old Jon Jones favorite, the crucifix. Facing the veteran, Vladimir Matyuchenko, Jones managed to score a takedown early, before slicing through his opponent's defenses with ease. Matyuchenko had faced off with more than a few world-class fighters in his time, but this was a different proposition entirely. Jones was light years ahead of anything Vladimir had come up against before, and when he got the crucifix position, it was the ultimate checkmate. With no way of defending against Jon's elbows, the ref was forced to jump in and call this one off. As close to an inescapable position as you'll ever see in MMA. Ryan Bader. When the future Bellator champion Ryan Bader was matched up against Jon Jones, it was pointed to as a real pairing of two major prospects. The winner looked set to be the next major contender at 205 pounds, and fans were split down the middle on who to back. But once this fight began, there was a huge gulf in talent that came to the surface immediately. Not only technical talent, but physical skill, dynamism on the feet, and the ability to control on the mat. Jones was just far beyond Ryan Bader at this point, and after beating him up for a round and some change, Jon applied the fight-ending guillotine choke, brushing his fellow rising star aside and making it clear that he and he alone was the guy to watch at light heavyweight. Shogun Rua. The future of mixed martial arts came to be the present when Jon Jones stepped in against Shogun Rua for his first shot at UFC Gold. Rua was a legend of the old guard, a dangerous and highly talented fighter, sure, but a man who was about to understand his own limitations in the most dramatic way possible. Jones, aged just 23 at the time, manhandled Shogun from start to finish. Seriously, this was like watching a pro take on an amateur, except this young and inexperienced kid was making a bona fide legend of the game look totally clueless in there. Every moment of this bout was more or less controlled by Jones. And when he finally turned up the heat and started the finishing sequence, Shogun actually tapped out, just as the ref called the TKO. The youngest champion in UFC history had been crowned, and he was clearly a generational talent. Quinton Rampage Jackson. Jones's first title defense was a pretty straightforward affair, facing another Pride legend in Quinton Rampage Jackson. Jon played a smart game from start to finish, peppering the front leg of Jackson early to limit his offense. This was like watching Jones taming Rampage in front of our very eyes. And when the championship rounds finally came, it was all Jones. When he finally managed to sink in the fight-ending rear naked choke, it seemed like more of a formality than anything else. Complete and utter domination. Lyoto Machida. It was always going to be interesting to see what happened when Jones came up against an opponent who gave him some trouble early. And in his title defense against Lyoto Machida, we managed to see Jones's fight IQ come to the surface in a huge way. Lyoto's odd blitzing style of karate striking was actually proving difficult to navigate for this young champion in round one. And even in the commentary booth, Joe Rogan was openly questioning how this inexperienced fighter would handle adversity like this. Well, as it turned out, Jones was more than up to the task. And in anticipation of Lyoto's forward bursts, Jones landed a huge counter elbow in the second round, crumbling Machida there and then, before latching onto his neck in the standing guillotine position. And the way he just let the Dragon's body fall limply once he went unconscious, man, This was a cold finish from Johnny Bones Jones. Vitor Belfort. More adversity to overcome for Jones comes in next, in the form of a highly dangerous Vitor Belfort. One of the greatest fighters in the opening round or two before his gas tank inevitably fails him. And in that opening spell, Vitor actually managed to catch John in an armbar, hyperextending his arm to the point where 90% of fighters may have tapped. But if you needed proof of Jones's indomitable spirit, he fought through this pain, allowing his arm to bend in ways that an arm should never bend. And sure enough, once he survived this, Belfort was slowly gassing out. Jones would eventually lock in a Kimura in the later rounds, totally turning the tables on the Brazilian and proving to the world that his championship mentality was totally bulletproof. Chael Sonnen. Look, we understand that a season of television involving Chael Sonnen and Jon Jones is always going to do great numbers, but the idea of Chael being anything more than an easy sparring session for Jon was kind of ridiculous. And after spending all that time on camera together, Jones took great pleasure in beating Sonnen at his own game, opting to employ a grinding wrestling style on the bad guy before finishing him by TKO later in the first round. The funny thing is that Chael would have become champion of the world if he had just survived a few more seconds. Unbeknownst to him, Jones had totally mangled his toe mid-fight, something that would have caused a doctor's stoppage if Sonnen had made it to round 2. Jones didn't even realize that he needed a finish desperately, but he still got it. Daniel Cormier. The more devastating win of Jon Jones's career might not technically count as a win anymore thanks to a failed USADA test, but everyone who watched the UFC 214 main event knows what they saw. Jones and Cormier, number 2, was a damn good fight at first, a clash of the two best fighters of their era. And though DC didn't get the job done, he still put up a brave effort, a lot better than his performance in the first fight anyway. But when Jones found home with a huge head kick in round 3, it set in motion a truly violent sequence. Jones rained down some hellacious ground and pound on DC, getting all of that built-up tension out in one go. And as DC himself very emotionally admitted directly after, it's hard to call it a rivalry when one fighter goes 2-0 so easily. Alexander Gustafsson. If you're looking for proof of Jon Jones's constant evolution, look no further than the night and day difference between his first match with Alexander Gustafsson and their eventual rematch. The first was a closely contested war, an instant classic of the 205-pound division. Their second, not so much. This time, Jones was not pushing his luck by partying his free time away. And during the opening 2 rounds, he comprehensively proved himself to be the better fighter, using his expert reflexes to put on a defensive masterclass on the feet. In the 3rd round, he then shot in for a takedown, dominating Gus from the top before hammering him out for the TKO win. A totally one-sided victory for Jon Jones, and his final ever finish as a 205-pounder. Cyril Gane. And finally, we come to the most recent fight and the most recent finish in the career of Jon Jones. His legendary run. But enjoy these battles as much as we like compiling them. Please subscribe and hit the like button. Trust us, you'll want to know about all the crazy stuff that's going to happen next.
Undisputed champion of the world, Johnny